What's going on, guys? Hopefully you had a great weekend. I'm doing scan a little bit earlier this weekend. It is Saturday, so I don't know if we're going to get it out for Saturday or Sunday. But whatever the case is, I've got my weekend loaded. So everything finally caught up to me. I have a nice cold that started, as well as about 2 feet of snow coming on the night that we're doing a gala, which is Sunday night at 5 p.m. So we've got 185 people and 2 feet of snow to deal with and a cold. So not my favorite of weekends by any means, but we'll get through it. I'm not going to go crazy with a longer scan tonight as far as, giving kind of a full lesson, but I am going to kind of recap a little bit of what happened this week. We had a lot of good trades it was more of a different style. It wasn't necessarily a reactive, be prepared, get ready to react when this happens, but rather a trend join, non-breakout style type of squeezes that were very, very highly predictable. And anybody that has paid attention likely caught a good portion of some of those moves. HEPA was one of them, which I'll go over at $4. I kind of put out the thesis as to why 455 was the trigger, and if it was to consolidate and confirm at that level, why I felt like it could go nuts. And that was spelled out and prior to the days that it happened. And likewise with CGIX, I put the same thesis out that if you're buying breakouts, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion, because then it's going to bring in the emotional aspect. But if you were there on dips and dips continued to hold, then there was a good chance that we're going to have that move, which we got on Friday. So and then ASLN was the last one. But as noted, you need to know what you own, and most of you guys that have been following these videos know what that means at this point. There's major risk there, which also gives confidence to shorts. It's a much bigger float than what most of the shorts have been used to lately, so sometimes there's confidence that comes with a larger float. But overall, the trend held, shorts got bent, and it was a monster squeeze. So the biggest thing about ASLN was it's one of the few times that selling when a newsletter buys was not the right thing to do, which I'll get into as well once I click over to my screen so you guys can see it. But most of the time, and one of the major questions that I get from new guys that jump in the room and whatnot is like, what do you mean by a newsletter? And basically, it's not bashing a newsletter or anything like that, but there is a way in which trading works. And when 1,000 people do the same thing and it does not immediately break out, the point or what you have to understand is, where do you think that volume is going to go, right? So if 1,000 people all buy for this breakout and it doesn't budge, they're all going to be looking to the left side. They're all going to be looking to hit the bid, right? Because, all right, everybody just came in, it didn't budge, now what? Oh, I should probably get out. And then they decide to get out and straight down. And then you're stuck with potentially the bag, you're stuck with a bad entry, whatever it may be, and you know how the rest of that unfolds. So it's good to be aware when an unnatural force comes into a breakout trade. And it's very frustrating as a momentum trader, HEPA this week, as well as a few others, where I am concentrating on getting a really, really good average. It starts to consolidate. It's almost nearing that breakout, and I want it to kind of come by surprise, and then somebody tries to force it through. And so that's the most frustrating part about this type of trading, especially when one person can influence the move. But it is what it is, and 90% of the time I am happy that I sold. And when I don't, I pay for it. So as much as it would have been nice to catch that entire move on ASLN, it is what it is. Before I jump into the rest of the scan, as I mentioned last week, well, two things. One, I have to pick a winner for the Centerpoint shirt, so I will do that in a moment. But we have the Black Friday sales, Cyber Monday sales coming, and whatnot. And as I noted last week, we haven't, I actually said since 2018 in my prior video, but we haven't raised any prices since 2008. So it's been 10, 11 years of the same thing, but all we've done is reinvest and create new alert type things. We have streaming, morning call, microphone, all kinds of stuff that we didn't have on day one, continually making it better and better and better. And therefore, December, I think it's December 3rd, we are raising prices, taking out the standard. We're just going to go from elite and above. So this is the last sale prior to that increase, and the offer that we have right now is the best one that we've had in the 10 or 11 years that we've been doing this. So when you start to kind of do the math on what you're also getting on as add-ons, it's a really incredible deal. So the winner for the Centerpoint t-shirt is Craig Duffy, and he wrote about letting price confirm, not necessarily just because it breaks a certain level, but when it breaks over that level, comes back, confirms, retests, confirms, and starts to take that second trend higher. And the reason I think that that's very important is that's exactly what we're going to be going over today on HEPA, ASLN, and CGIX. So Craig Duffy, I will reply to you as well, but you won the Centerpoint t-shirt for this week. And as always, leave a comment on your biggest takeaway from the scans. And like I've said before, it helps me learn where I should focus so that it kind of relates to you guys better. Because sometimes I just assume people know certain things, right? Sometimes it's very easy to talk as if the individual knows exactly what you're talking about. You're kind of making assumptions that they know where you're going with things, but they don't. So sometimes they need to break things down a little bit more. So you guys' feedback is fantastic, and it also lets me know where I can expand on things. So again, please make sure you do leave a comment, and let's get into scan. So the first and foremost, just a small recap, just to kind of go over what happened last week and sort of the why. HEPA, CGIX, and ASLN. And also EYEG is a potential for this week ahead. Why was I interested? What made them pop up on scan? And what was the levels that was of interest to me, and why? So for those of you guys that remember this HEPA, this was a huge move a couple days ago, or I guess a week and a half ago now. The volume was major, and they not only trapped the longs, then they trapped the shorts, and then they trapped the longs again. They did the same move last time. I put both charts on my Instagram so you guys could see how similar they were, but the action that happens here was such a big volume, I think it was about 28 million shares, that normally, you're patient and you let it fade off, and if you kind of look at the daily chart, you can see that typically if you hold it, it just kind of continually fades off. So why would it be any different, right? And so this day, like I said, this had 27,500,000 shares. And so the next day, it had about 1.9 million, and it pretty much stayed steady, but no real reason for shorts to panic because, last time it did the same thing. It kind of just went sideways, and then it faded off. Home run. Next day, it was only 500,000 shares, 571,000. So if you think about it, and you start to go back and you look at where the action actually happened, and so this was the big move on the first day. And so you've got this morning action early. It starts to consolidate. There's a buyer at 370s. If you guys remember the recap, 370s was a key level as to why I was long, and selling some into the 430s. Flushed out, came back, switched to the short bias, right? So if you were short, you either got chopped up or maybe you kind of averaged in, and you probably had, at best, a 380 to 4 average, right? And so everybody that was in above that 370 line, like we talked about, which was the prior support, now becomes resistance. There's zero reason to really worry about anything, because now all those people are stuck with a higher average, and we're under that what was support and now is resistance. So same thing, comes back, retest, it fails, comes back, retest, it fails, and then we start to get into this slow, steady, grind, and it just doesn't break down. And so the level, the key, becomes looking left. So if you can see here, the 370 level, which was that support from this pre-market day right here, 370s. I can zoom out a little bit. So you can draw the line across, and you can see that this base becomes this peak, all these peaks, and then when it breaks through, all of a sudden we're back up towards the highs. And so the number that I immediately gave people was 455. And the reason that I got that is I just went right over here and I looked at what the top was. So that is the best price. So just call it 450, right? 450, 455. And related to Craig's comment on the last YouTube, just because it hits that 450 does not mean it's a buy, right? It could be, it could work, but there's a good chance that it's going to need to stuff a few times, kind of work out any shorts that were in there, or at least convince shorts to hold. And each time it retests, it might fail, until it finally does go, come back, and confirm. And so you can see that it kind of went up there, pulled back. Next breakout attempt, come back. Next breakout, comes back. It kind of just starts to fade off. So this day in the room, I was suggesting to traders, don't chase the breakout, but I want to be accumulating when nobody wants it, because I don't want to be that breakout buyer, because we're going to get in a situation where everybody buys the breakout, slams down, and you're going to be emotional about it. But if you have a better average, you're going to let that trade work. So anyway, we busted through that 450 level, and this point right over here, it goes way above it, 470s or so, not crazy, but comes back and it confirms that 450 level, that 450, 455 level. So we're not chasing the breakout, but we're letting it kind of come back and base at that 450 level. Then we started to rip after hours, comes back, and shorts are like, all right, that's fine. We're squeezed everybody out. It won't do that again. Next morning, gaps up, fades off. Once again, convinces shorts, you're all set, no problem. And then all of a sudden, we take off. So shorts are obviously in a bind, and we had that first squeeze, and then they kind of let them out. And this is the conversation that I've had a bunch of times, where these biggest short squeezes, they retrace like 70% of the move, right? So if you've ever been bent up on a name, I'm sure we all have, you get this big move, and then you get this spot where you probably shouldn't be, but you're adding in, right? So now your average becomes, instead of 450, it becomes 470, 480. And so it starts to come back, and you're almost back to even, and then it ramps up. And it swipes back up again, and you're like, oh man, now you have 2x what you wanted. And then it starts to fade off, so you start to kind of add, because the only way you're going to break even is if you add, right? And then so it starts to break under VWAP, you're like, yes, it's finally here. All of a sudden, swipe, and you get screwed. So this is just a bunch of bad decisions over and over and over again, squeezing everybody out into a circuit. A lot of emotions here. But once again, this is probably just a squeeze from all of these people right here. We still have this big underlying issue with all these prior shorts from the day before. And therefore, we're continually holding trend. And as you saw on Friday, we once again are still holding trend. And there's a good chance that we could continually hold from here. So that's kind of the thesis as to why I was interested over that 450 level. The prior top was basically the prior top was 450s, 455s. 380s, 370s was that prior support. It became resistance. Everybody was confident. But the key is that it came on 28 million, 27 million shares. And then it started to come back up on 600,000, 500, 600,000. Then the next day it was back to the highs. And I made note of this on Twitter, on less than 500,000 shares. So it went back to the 430 level, 440 level on 500,000 shares. So if you go from 27.7 million shares to 500,000 shares, the math just doesn't work. Just because it prints lower, you know, it's fading and whatnot, does not mean there's enough liquidity for people to cover hundreds of thousands of shares, right? And that's what it comes down to. So, you know, a lot of times we look at price and we get convinced based off of price, but in the end, it's all based on liquidity. And, you know, the same thing happened on CLVS on Friday, where this is, you know, one of the hardest parts that I have as a trader. Same thing happened with me on CCXI and MYOV when, you know, you look back and you had these nice washouts and you kind of forget how far it came down, like $3 per share. And so this move from 1380s down to 13 was major. And I should have been a lot more aggressive covering, but then it snaps right back. And, you know, you got to go back and look, and just the liquidity compared to the rest of the day, there was two candles that you could have covered, and then that was it. And it wasn't enough volume for everybody to cover. So same kind of thought process with HEPA, except you're talking many, 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 many millions of float on CLVS versus something like HEPA, which is 3.5 million float. Same situation, CGIX. This was an idea from all week, and you can see it basically was holding trend all week. Don't buy breakouts, buy weakness when nobody wants it. Key levels being 680 and 7. And so this was the 7 breakout over here, and then 680s was the level that it was having trouble with throughout the day, right here, and right here. So basically, that day that it was breaking out, it was channel trading between, I think it was 620s, 6s, 620s, something like that, and 680s. So until it breaks through this level and confirms, you should assume that it's going to fail, but it did. It came back, held over 680s, and then obviously the covers came in. So again, this was an idea of not chasing the breakout, but being focused on proper entry. That'll keep you in the trade, keep emotions out, and obviously it worked out pretty well. This one is only $1 million and change float. So, you know, who knows? 7 a.m. on Monday, we might have 10, we might have 12, we could have 15, who knows? But it'll be an interesting one to see how it plays out. But once again, be cautious with the chase. But if there is a lot of shorts stuck in this thing, then, you know, anything is possible. And then once again, ASLN, same thing, where, you know, it's a situation of volume. And so you had this huge volume day, 13 million shares. You know, people trade it based off that liquidity. Next day, there's only 1 million. Next day, there's only 800,000. So you go from 13 million to 800,000. The numbers just don't make sense. And if shorts are positioned based off of 13 million, maybe they're short 20, 50, who knows how many thousand shares. Multiply that by a few big traders, and guess what? The entire volume on this day with 800,000, nobody could cover. Nobody could cover, even if it was a couple 100,000 shares. You wouldn't be able to cover in a situation like that until you get real volume again. And obviously you had some big squeezes here. And I think the fact that it closed relatively weak kept traders short. And, you know, I mentioned it was Wednesday because we had the day off for Thanksgiving, but I mentioned on this crack that once again, it was on relatively low volume. So you're trading, you know, 15 million shares, and then all of a sudden this crack happens on 100,000 shares. I don't buy it. And, you know, again, going back to know what you own, it's not an easy trade by any means, because this could be like a BNGO where they raise, you know, Monday or Tuesday or whatnot. That is the real risk. But as long as it's holding trend, I like dips for the potential squeeze. Now, again, this was a perfect breakout. I had a perfect entry. I bought the dips and whatnot, 290s. But a newsletter came in. And like I said, I have a rule. I have to sell every time a newsletter comes in, just because more often than not, I am happy that I sold. This is one of the few that, you know, it's upsetting. I could have made $4 or $5 a share or whatever it ended up being. But it is what it is. And, you know, rules are rules. You know, SFET, newsletter came in right here, right on the 10 break. So their entry at 10, they sell, the entire room sells, it's $1 lower within seconds. So that is why I always like to sell into newsletters. I'll reevaluate the situation later on, after they're out, after they move on, you know, give it a half an hour, let them churn out all the chasers, things like that. So anyway, that's the kind of the recap from last week, the thought process that goes behind those trades. Hopefully you guys had some good trades on those. I tried to spell them out, my thoughts as best as I could. So if you were reading Twitter, you knew where I was at with HEPA, CGIX, and ASLN. And I said this wouldn't be a long scan, but we're already at 20 minutes. So I already did more than I was thinking of doing. Last but not least, PTON. So those of you guys that have been watching this Sunday recap, Sunday scan for, you know, the last however many weeks we've been doing it, you guys know where I'm at on PTON. So hopefully you guys are, you know, having a good trade on it. So we closed around 35, 36, I think. Let me see. PTON. We closed at 35 and change. And, you know, I've been swinging it since, you know, the low 20s. And I kind of spelled out my thesis as to why on many of these Sunday scans. So, you know, this is the hard part for me where, you know, am I being greedy? I haven't sold any, right? So, am I being greedy, or am I, you know, should I let it continue to go? I originally said that I want to hold until 45 bucks. And now we're getting there. We're getting closer. We might have those days where it speeds up. But I've got, you know, a 10, 11, 12 padding now. And, you know, I gotta figure out, you know, do I sell a third? Do I just hold on and let it do my original thesis, or what? And originally, like I had tweeted, the WeWork IPO was canceled, right? And it was canceled right before PTON, and they didn't change the price that they were raising at, right? They kept it at 29. It was the high end, and you would think after WeWork that they would probably bring it down to a lower end and not screw up this IPO as well. And so for the fact that it opened and they priced so high, that was a no-brainer short for a lot of people. And in my opinion, you know, they weren't gonna, after the whole WeWork thing happened, they weren't going to let this one, you know, go to zero. And I think that's why we're at 75% of the float short, or whatever the number is now. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. We talk a lot about wicks. And, you know, you can see all these wicks. This is the same stuff that we talked about. We do it on Tandem Trader, textbook trading, all the educational videos we have. But a lot of times this is the conversation that we have on this Sunday night scan, the video. So you've seen those wicks, and as to why I am interested in buying dips on the week opens each day that it holds VWAP. So as I've said, my thought process is dips week open for the day trade, and just holding the trade for a swing. So hopefully you guys are, you know, if you did take the trade, if you saw a trade in it from the idea, you're up about, I don't know, 13 bucks a share or so. So congratulations if you did take part. So let's finally get into scan. So CGIX, like I said, and by the way, you know, this has been, like, these ones are okay, but it's been difficult for me to kind of just throw away everything that I've learned and just, you know, like these CLVS type moves, MYOV. MYOV was great, but all these moves are difficult to trust the fact that they've doubled and doubled and doubled, and then they still want to go. So it's been a very interesting week and a half, I guess, or 2 weeks of, you know, nail this trade, but then it flushes out, and then all of a sudden it's right back. So there's been a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of screwing up, overholding, minimizing of trades. Like I said, you know, last week, KRTX sucked for me. And then MYOV, you know, big trade, minimized. And so, look, it's going to happen. It's just part of trading, and you got to kind of unlearn some of the things that you've learned, and you've got to adapt along the way. And sometimes I'm just a little bit slower to adapt. Not normally, but it's just very difficult to trust some of these moves. But HEPA, CGIX, ASLN, those kind of things you can prepare for. It's best not to oversize. It's best to let them work for you. But like I said, CGIX, again, no chasing this thing. But you know, we obviously had somebody probably covering into the close, unless they're setting up for next week. If they put out a PR on this thing on Monday, I mean, heck, this thing could be, you know, SES style, where it goes, you know, 2025. That would be great. Perfect world, PR, I mean, it'd go nuts. But keep an eye, 7 a.m. Everybody gets all, you know, excited at 7 a.m. and we get those really, really big squeezes. So we'll see what happens with that. Nice breakout into the close on Friday. Watch all dips, and again, you know, make sure it's holding trend. Make sure you have a set risk, but don't be buying breakout with heavy volume, because you never know, that might be the last stuff. CANF was a nice opportunity if you were involved pre-market. I did not take this particular trade. You know, this is one of those types where I like to sell with them, not buy against them. For those of you guys that spend time with fundamentals, you know what that means. If not, use that as maybe a starting point to go and kind of explore the filings. But I think a lot of people were on the same side of this. I think a lot of people were shorting, and they just did not sell enough, and therefore shorts kind of were the base all day, and then they squeezed them out into the close. And not that it was a big short squeeze, it was just they didn't sell enough, there wasn't enough inventory, and therefore the short cover just provided enough of a base to keep this thing up. So typically when this happens, I would expect maybe a 10-20 cent gap down on Monday, and then maybe look for failed follow through to kind of fade it from there. But we are in a different market right now, so you know, anything is possible. CLVS, as I said, this is looking back and in hindsight, you know, this was a huge move, right? And you know, pretty good idea in the room. Being cautious, not trying to find the top. You don't want to exhaust yourself on the front side of the move. You know, I tried it a few times, and you know, I wasn't aggressive up here at all. I wasn't trying to be a hero at you know, nailing the short, and you know, it would have worked okay, but you know, what if I did that and it was MYOV and it went another $3 per share? It wouldn't have been worth it. So for me, as I said in the room, I wanted to see 15.80s to 16 kind of come down, stuff, and then join it. And then the same thing I said at the 15 level, I want to see 14.80s, 15 start to stuff, and then come down. And so that was a much cleaner move, but you had that one opportunity to cover. And when the trade's working so well, it's hard to transition into cover mode just like that. So, you know, it's always good to, I think, put some covers out there, some wish orders and the flushes, so you don't have any emotional attachment. You don't have to make that decision on the fly. You know, if you're looking at it and you're like, man, in a perfect world, this would flush out 13.50s to 13. If you put those out there, then you don't have to worry about, you know, looking at this and say, yes, it's, you know, it's unwinding. Oh crap, it went back to 14. You know, you don't have to make that decision, and you know, that's a big difference. And same thing happened with CCXI. Right over here that I put on Twitter, but this V-shaped recovery, you know, and looking back, it was insiders that were selling, and this was actually their last sell. And like I said, it felt like somebody just kind of pulled the sells off the tape and swipes right back. So, you know, this is my toughest part as a trader, to kind of figure out, you know, if I'm being too greedy, if it's pulled back too much before that swipe back up that kind of screws you. So CLVS, we're still in go mode. I mean, it's very easily can squeeze. I would almost consider this like MYOV. Like, don't underestimate it. But wait for VWAP to confirm. You know, like wait for it to fail, and then look for that backside move. ENDP. This one came in the same day with Teva. This was the headlines with the opioid AG General whatever, AG General going after them, probing them. I don't remember the exact headline, but whatever it was, it hit all these. But they don't care right now, right? And so all that did was bring in more shorts to, you know, shove it higher. So I think that's why we're flirting with the breakout again here, and maybe we have enough this time to actually do it. HEPA, same things I said before. This reminds me a lot of HTGM, and you know, they just need a PR, but you know, it just reminds me a lot of when people got in trouble with this one, and it went out and went crazy. So you know, I'm not suggesting that it's going there, but I'm just suggesting don't underestimate it if you're fighting it. But hopefully we have some opportunities to still get long. I still do think shorts are in trouble. I think they're just kind of compounding the shorts, you know, and creating higher and higher levels. And at some point, you know, we might have that last hurrah. AKBA, great trend. Nothing that I want to fight. It did come back into VWAP under it, swipe back. So this kind of action works longs out, works shorts in, and you know, it can create extended moves. And the more times that it pulls back, the less aggressive shorts or the less aggressive sellers will be when and if it does pull back, because they're kind of making them immune to these price moves. Let's see, ARWR. This one I just am keeping an eye on. It's an incredible move. Congrats to longs. You know, there's a lot of like cult type longs on it, but they're getting paid. You know, like anytime that I would have shorted the move these days and kind of had mentioned it, you immediately get blown up on Twitter like, yeah, we'll see you in 6 months, we'll see you in a year, idiot, shorting it, this and that. And granted, you know, I'm talking about a 3-hour trade or a 1-hour trade or 10 minutes, and they're, you know, talking about long term, but I mean, they're killing it. So congrats if you're long this thing. And again, it's got those wicks that we talk about. You know, all the dips are getting bought. So this is just a go-to name when and if we see a pullback on bio. XCUR. This was an idea on Scan on Friday. Again, we talked about you know, this volume right here. This is kind of adapting to what's working right now, right? So you got this heavy volume here, pulls back, consolidates. I know not much is going on, but you've got this 7 million share day, and then you've got no volume, and now you've got secondary move. So now I like to watch all dips versus 320s, and you know, it's a slow grinder, but watch for it to pull back using kind of this VWAP as my risk. As long as that trend holds, I mean, you know, you've got crazy moves like this ORMP lately, right? Same thing that I was talking about with AKBA. You've got this nice move, it comes back in. That gets out any chasers, that brings in shorts, that works out any people with emotional attachment that may be selling it, and it provides a kind of a base for the next leg up. So ideally, you know, you'll see some weak opens and maybe a little bit more breakout towards 5. We'll see what happens, and we'll go from there. DTIL. Major mover. We talked about this the last couple scans. This was an idea from Michelle at $7. She has been killing it this year. If you're not interested in day trading, by the way, tradeonthefly.com, that's Michelle. We have access to her swing room, but she is phenomenal. She's really great with charts, and anytime that we both like ping each other the same name, it's always a really, really nice one. So it's nice to be on the same page as her. So she does like a ledger, and if you're not looking for the intraday action and you're looking for the bigger picture type action, check her out. But nice consolidation here for the next leg up. We might be doing the same thing as this right here at 18, and if so, then we're going to go 2022. I'm not looking to get in front of it, but you know, when these things pull back, moves like this, don't underestimate, right? I mean, we could really pull back hard once this short squeeze is done, and this is nothing more than a short squeeze. This isn't natural. EYEG, same comments as CGIX, ASLN, and HEPA. Okay, so we had the huge move, we had the huge volume, 15, 16 million shares, and now dips are getting bought up. 730s was the resistance. It acted as the resistance the last, this day and this day, and then they came back, retested it, held, came back, retested it, held. So now we're into that wick mode where the wicks are getting bought up. Week opens for breakouts, and again, that's the intraday chart. It looks like nothing. So one, it's not a breakout trade, you know, where you got to chase it. Two, it's more of a big picture idea, so it's not like you're going to be buying a bunch of stock. And then three, if you are looking to trade the momentum, you need to wait for the volume to really pick up and for key levels to break. So we're going to be retesting that, and I think that over probably that 9 mark is the area in which we could do some real damage. I'm assuming that it's going to fail until it suggests otherwise. And last but not least, CCXI. It's been basing. It has come back a little bit, but I feel like it might be the one that kind of just kicks off radar and goes to 25. So I'm not exceptionally bearish on it, and I have not had a very good read on bios at all lately, so I'm putting my confidence level at like 12%. But if it does fail, I will join it, but it's a light trader, but I'm thinking that it could maybe kind of staircase down towards 25. But with that said, we're in a hot bio market, so the price action would need to confirm my thesis in order to even take that trade. So, you know, even like these CNSTs starting to rip again. NXTC did the offering and started to rip. ARAV did an offering and, you know, ripped back. So that's it for my scan tonight. I actually went a little bit longer than I thought, so that's good. I wasn't planning on doing the whole recap, but it's a very big kind of thing that's going on right now in the market, these HEPA, CGIX type trades, and we're finally getting those multi-day runs. You know, I've always mentioned, you know, it'd be nice to get the multi-day runs back. They're finally here, and you got to be able to understand how to identify them, and basically, you know, let them ramp up, and then wait and see how each time, if it starts to create higher lows, and if it does, that's when you know that dips, you have a proper risk, and you can anticipate that breakout level, but it's not until it breaks through that level, comes back and bases, that it's going to actually have those outlier moves, which is what we got on HEPA, CGIX, and the rest. So again, if you guys are looking to get involved in Investors Underground, like I said, December 3rd, prices are going up. And we have Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals that are literally the best that we've ever had since inception. So there's a lot of add-ons that are being given to you. 200 value here, 500 value there, $400 value there, or whatnot. So if you are looking to get involved, become part of the chat room and the educational materials and all that good stuff, I think that today is a really good day to do that, especially with the deals that we have going on. So all right, guys, if you have any questions, as always, use the comment section below. You should give a like if you like these kind of things. That always helps us. But don't forget to write your biggest takeaway from Scan I know I'm repeating myself, but it helps me because I like to know where you guys are at, what you guys find value in, and at that point I can start to focus in on what I'm doing to make sure that you guys get good stuff out of this Sunday scan.